Hey guys, creator mom. So when we learn certain models and ways of thinking about the world around us and how things work, it can be very difficult for us to accept other models or another model because it takes a completely different way of seeing things. Let's take this example. The spinning round Earth globe model of the way to look at the Earth as a planet, the sun, a big gigantic thing out there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the planets as, little other round globes that we all spin around together, right? And we're all floating in this thing called outer space. We're just floating in this expansive universe. When you see the world through your imagination in that way, through that model, and somebody comes to you and talks about a different model of a way to see the Earth where we're living and these things called planets, it takes you have to wrap your mind around that in order to understand and see things from that perspective. Or else you'll think it's dumb. You'll be like, well, how do we float in the middle of outer space on a flat Earth? Okay, well, you have to get the notion of outer space out of your mind. And the notion of floating, you have to get that notion out of your mind. So it's like there's certain things that you can't think of like that anymore. You have to accept a new model and a new way of seeing things. Or whatever version of what you're learning about what the Earth is and what the planets actually are, whatever. This, maybe this turns some people off because they can only accept that there's one model and that's it. And it's in so many ways, of course, in that level of thinking that there's only this way of seeing it and this is the way it is, creates a lot of hatred and anger and things like that, because people can't accept that there's other ways to see things or do things because of models that we've been shown. So it's like the same thing goes with learning and stuff like that. And we're like, okay, we have this model of learning. We go to school, a teacher teaches kids a curriculum so that they can learn everything that they have to, because if not, there's going to be a bad outcome, Or how would this work if you're not doing things this way? Well, and it's just like with the models of spinning globe or flat Earth or crater Earth or whatever. People say, well, how does this work? And how would that work in that model? And how would this work? And it's the same thing with learning any different paradigm that you're learning. Well, if you're not teaching a kid a curriculum, well, how do they learn to read? How do they learn how to do math? And you know what I'm saying? Well, thankfully, if you have questions about anything, there's so many resources out there for people to expand their minds and learn different ways and paradigms to think. But if you want to stay in a mentality of ridicule, then you're never going to learn anything else. You're never going to expand your mind. You're going to stay ignorant. And it doesn't mean that you have to believe in those other models, but the least we can do is not be ignorant or not ridicule other ways of seeing and doing things and perceiving things. So, it's the same thing, with the learning, through unschooling. Well, how do kids learn that way? And I was thinking this morning about how they say that learning is in the control of the learner, but we're delusional, we're delulu enough to believe that teachers control learning, that a curriculum controls learning. No. Only the learner controls what they learn. You think they might be learning what you want them to learn, but maybe in fact they're learning, oh, this teacher's a bitch. Or when I do this to this teacher, she reacts that way. You think they're learning about the curriculum teacher, and they're not. They're somewhere else. But I guess we humans are really good at memorizing. We can be. If you're not good at memorizing, then you're going to fail the school system. And whenever you're in school, whatever you retain is retained probably is because of you. It's because of you and your own interest and whatever you thought peculiar, what something caused you to remember that piece of information. It was because of you. It was because of the learner. So the learner is always in control of the learning, not the teacher. So I'm reading here. Sorry, I'm watching my oatmeal too. Making sure that it doesn't overflow. Okay. So lack of trust leads to control. And this is just what I was talking about in my other video about lack of trust in our body and our intuition leads to outer arbitrary rules. So this is a really good example that she gives in this book. We could all relate to this. And I just want to say that I'm not perfect at this. I'm learning, and I also struggle, and I have challenges. So as we all do. So as you pass through the living room, you notice John sprawled on the couch. Now, for one thing, in the household I grew up in, and probably a lot of you, if your parent is walking around, maybe they're cleaning, and you're on the couch, that's a problem. They're going to be very angry at you because you're not picking up on the cue that it's time to clean, and you're being lazy. Anyways, I'm going to continue reading. Are you still watching TV? I'll read it how my mother would have said it. Are you still watching TV? Your brain will turn to mush. It's nice outside. Turn the TV off and go out and play. As I mentioned earlier, without trust in both the process and your children, now forget you haven't trust in your children. That's on another level, right? There is a thing about children, and the energy, at least I feel like growing up from my family, and the energy about children is like, children are bad, if you don't give them structure and things like that, they'll be bad. You gotta keep them in line, So anyways, there is a level of uncertainty with unschooling that many parents will find too uncomfortable to live with. What happens if they commit to unschooling, but then life rushes along and they don't take the time to be with their children to observe unschooling in action? Without doing the work alongside their newly unschooling children to develop that level of understanding, deep level of understanding and trust, parents will probably find themselves frequently feeling uncomfortable and questioning unschooling and themselves. Why do they want to do the same thing all day? Are they learning anything? Why won't they stop nicely and come to the table when I call them to eat? That level of discomfort is not sustainable over the long term, right? You're going to rebound. If after a while they don't understand what is happening and why these parents will begin to feel the need to exert more control over their children's learning to relieve some of that stress. Yet philosophically, we know that the best learning happens when our children are free to choose their learning paths, to follow their passions and interests at their own pace. When you are unschooling, that need to control is detrimental. I can relate with that because as growing up with a narcissistic parent, there was a lot of control that wanted to be exerted aren't you done doing that now? Or, well, when I was older, can't you pray and clean? I had just got into my relationship with God, and I was really into prayer, and I could just stay in prayer in God's presence for a while. But if the narcissistic parent is cleaning, everyone is cleaning. So can't you pray and clean at the same time? They hate what you do. All right, let me keep reading. So, a parent who doesn't, but even a parent who is not narcissistic can experience this need to want to relieve this stress, of this fear. A parent who doesn't trust that their child is really learning much of value while playing video games is likely to serendipitously control them by encouraging them to do something else, if not flat out putting constraints on their game time. I have really no issue with that now with video games, because I kind of think you got to be a ding dong to not think that someone's not learning from video games. Actually, I was talking to one of my sons and realized, I said, you know what? I bet that video games started out with war and military stuff. Like, I bet they're the ones who used gaming first, simulations and stuff. Because it engages like the mind, the imagination, and then like you reenact that in real life. But I guess they say that's what's wrong with like violent video games. Like, oh, we don't want kids reenacting violence. So yeah. Anyways, I digress on that. So they serendipitously control them by encouraging them to do something else, if not flat out putting constraints on their gaming time. A parent who doesn't trust that their child is learning about reading by absorbing the literate world around them is likely to share unsolicited word pronunciations or ask their child to sound out words around them, if not flat out require 15 minutes a day of reading exercises. These actions may help the parents achieve a level of comfort day to day, right? That's going to soothe me. That's going to soothe the parent. Like, yes, I checked it off my list. Whew, they are learning something because, I was in control of that. But it is at the cost of their children's exploration and learning. And there's a good chance that this lack of trust will also damage their relationship, because the children will feel judged and found wanting. They will feel like they aren't learning up to their parents' expectations. That in turn will discourage them from approaching their parents with questions and comments and conversation, which interferes with their learning. It becomes a downward spiral and self-fulfilling prophecy. Exerting control leads to the need for more control. On a related note, children know when they are capable of more freedom and responsibility. Yet, if their requests to, say, walk on their own to the park down the street or sleep over at a friend's house are consistently denied for no reason other than generalized fears, the children will begin to lose trust in their parents' judgment. Again, the overall relationship is damaged. Instead, if you are worried that your child isn't learning much about reading, observe their day-to-day actions through that lens for a few weeks. Notice the words that they recognize as they are playing video games, or browsing the TV guide, or cruising the aisles at the grocery store. Notice the words that they are asking you to read for them. Notice how well they remember the stories you read to them. Learning to read is not a skill learned overnight. It is the process of pulling together many smaller skills, typically over a period of years. Yet your realization that they are reading can come seemingly out of the blue. Whenever you find yourself worried or even just curious about something, use this kind of analysis to dig into it further. I'm just going to stop there. Take care.